The morning mist clung to the skeletal remains of New Haven like a burial shroud, obscuring the twisted metal and shattered glass that marked humanity's failed attempt at colonization. From her hidden vantage point among the crystalline formations of the Voltari observation post, Kira pressed her palm against the transparent barrier, her violet eyes tracking the lone figure moving through the debris field below. Ethan Reeves didn't know he was being watched. The 19-year-old survivor moved with practiced efficiency, his worn leather jacket providing little protection against the colony planet's harsh wind. She'd been observing him for weeks now, ever since the Council had assigned her this sector for surveillance. The Voltari had maintained their distance from the human settlers for decades, convinced that contact would only lead to conflict. Fear ran deep in her people's collective memory, stories of other worlds where first contact had ended in bloodshed. But Ethan was nothing like the violent invaders from those cautionary tales. She watched as he crouched beside a twisted piece of machinery, his calloused hands moving with surprising gentleness. He wasn't just scavenging, he was fixing things. The water filtration system, she realized, as he connected tubes with careful precision. The kind of work that helped the small community of survivors in the southern sector. Kira shifted her weight, accidentally activating the proximity sensor in her suit. The harmonics it generated were inaudible to human ears, but she held her breath anyway. Breaking protocol meant erasure from her clan, a fate worse than death for her social species. "Come on, just a little more," Ethan muttered, his voice carrying in the thin air. He adjusted something with a tool he'd fashioned from a bent spoon, his brow furrowed in concentration. The filtration unit hummed to life, and a smile transformed his weathered face. Not the triumphant grin of conquest she'd expected, but something softer. Relief, tinged with exhaustion. When had she started noticing such details about his expressions? A commotion from the eastern approach drew both their attention. An elderly survivor, bent with age and clutching a makeshift cane, stumbled toward Ethan. Kira recognized him, Jonas, one of the original colonists who'd somehow survived the war that had destroyed their settlement. "Water's running again?" Jonas asked, his voice cracked from dehydration. "Should be good for a while," Ethan replied, standing to face the older man. "How are you holding up?" "Badly," Jonas admitted with a bitter laugh. "Haven't eaten in 3 days." Kira watched, mesmerized, as Ethan reached into his pack and pulled out a wrapped bundle. His last protein ration, she knew, because she'd witnessed him save it yesterday when others in his sector had shared their meal without inviting him. "Take it," Ethan said, pressing the package into Jonas's weathered hands. "But you—" "I'll manage. Someone your age needs it more." Jonas accepted with tears in his eyes, clasping Ethan's shoulder before limping away. Kira observed as Ethan stood alone, his own stomach clearly protesting. She'd learned to read the subtle signs of human hunger before returning to his work on the filtration system. Who was this human who gave his last meal to someone else? Who fixed things instead of breaking them? The Council's warnings about human nature seemed increasingly hollow as she watched Ethan sacrifice his own needs for others. A sharp trill from her suit's communication device startled her back to reality. Time for her shift change. But as she prepared to activate her camouflage and retreat deeper into Voltari territory, she made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. She would return tomorrow, and the day after, not just to fulfill her surveillance duties, but to understand this human who challenged everything she'd been taught about his species. As she slipped away through the crystalline passages that only Voltari technology could navigate, Kira didn't notice that Ethan had paused in his work, his head tilted as if he'd sensed something. He stared in her direction for a long moment before shaking his head and returning to his repairs. But deep down, he'd felt the weight of eyes upon him. And somewhere even deeper, he'd felt the loneliness that accompanied survival lifting, just slightly. Neither of them realized that their fates were now irrevocably intertwined, set in motion by one simple observation. Kindness recognized across the vast gulf of species, fear, and protocol. The first thread in a tapestry that would either bring two worlds together or tear them irrevocably apart. For days, Kira had maintained her routine, returning to her crystal perch at dawn and watching Ethan navigate his dangerous world. Today, however, chaos ruled the ruins. A section of steel framework had collapsed during the night, trapping a child beneath twisted metal. The other survivors stood helplessly around the unstable debris, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He crawled into the maze of bent supports, ignoring the groaning protest of metal under pressure. "Please don't shift," Kira whispered from her hiding spot, her claws digging into the crystal surface. Voltari could manipulate energy fields to stabilize structures, but using her abilities would expose her presence. The internal war between her want to help and her duty to remain hidden tore at her resolve. "Got you," Ethan's voice emerged from the wreckage, followed by the sound of grinding metal. He emerged minutes later, a small girl clutched to his chest, her leg bleeding but intact. The relief on his face as he handed her to her mother made Kira's dual heart skip in rhythm she'd never experienced before. But the rescue had cost him. That evening, as she watched him hunker down in his shelter, she noticed the fever, the trembling hands, the way he pressed his palm to his forehead, trying to will away the radiation sickness that came from prolonged exposure to the colony's unstable environment. He was alone, always alone. Even surrounded by other survivors, he maintained a careful distance, as if believing himself unworthy of their company despite his constant acts of service. That night, Kira made her first transgression. Under cover of darkness, she approached his shelter. Her suit's medical scanner confirmed her suspicions, severe radiation exposure coupled with dehydration and exhaustion. From her emergency kit, she removed anti-radiation medication and hydration supplements. But leaving items required explanation. Using her suit's holographic projector, she created a simple message in the ground outside his shelter. Symbols that meant friend and help in the universal pictographic language developed for interspecies communication. For the next week, she established a pattern. Ethan would leave his shelter for his daily scavenging, and Kira would leave supplies. Food, medicine, sometimes small tools she'd noticed him searching for. Each gift was accompanied by the same symbols, and gradually she watched understanding dawn on his face. The game of cat and mouse might have continued indefinitely, if not for the incident during the solar storm. Ethan had started leaving his own messages. Simple drawings sketched in the dirt, a stick figure offering food to another, a sun rising over the ruins, a question mark. Today, he'd drawn what appeared to be two figures side by side, one clearly human, the other ambiguous. Kira crept closer to examine his latest artwork when a disruption in her suit's power systems caused her camouflage to flicker. In that split second of visibility, she found herself staring directly into Ethan's eyes. He'd been waiting, hidden behind a collapsed wall, his own trap for his mysterious benefactor. Time froze. Kira's hand moved to her emergency transporter, but something in his expression stopped her. Not fear, not aggression, curiosity tinged with hope. "Please," he said softly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Don't go." Her suit's translator conveyed the meaning, and against every protocol, every training session, every warning, she remained still. "You've been watching me," he continued, his voice gaining confidence. "Helping me, why?" The question she'd been asking herself for weeks. Why did she care about this lone human's survival? Why did his acts of kindness resonate in her heart like remembered songs? She attempted to speak, but human vocal cords were different from Voltari anatomy. Instead, she held up her hands, mimicking his peaceful gesture, then pointed to the symbols in the ground and then to herself. "Friend," he read aloud, a smile beginning to form. "You're saying you're a friend." She nodded, the movement feeling strange but natural. A brilliant flash lit the sky, the beginning of an electromagnetic storm that would rage for days. Her suit alarm screamed warnings about solar radiation levels. Ethan looked up, then back at her, understanding dawning. "You need shelter too," he said. "The storm, it's going to be bad, please," he gestured toward his modest shelter. "Let me return the favor for once." Every instinct, every law of her people, demanded she activate her emergency transport and flee. But as she looked into his eyes, genuinely concerned for her safety despite the shock of first contact, Kira made a choice that would echo through both their lives. She followed him into the shelter just as the first waves of radiation bombardment struck the surface. As they settled into the cramped space, Ethan carefully maintained distance, respecting her obvious otherness while still radiating warmth and acceptance. "I'm Ethan," he said, pressing his hand to his chest. Following his gesture, she placed her clawed hand over her dual hearts. "Kira," she managed, the word oddly shaped by her vocal cords but recognizable. As the storm raged outside, two beings from different worlds sat in companionable silence, the first bridges of understanding beginning to form between them. Neither knew that several Voltari scouts had detected her energy signature before the storm hit, or that they were already on their way to investigate this unprecedented breach of protocol. For now, there was only the shelter, the storm, and the growing awareness that loneliness was a universal constant, and perhaps so was the need for connection. The electromagnetic storm struck with fury that defied the weather prediction systems. Ethan had been caught outside his shelter territory, searching for scrap metal to reinforce the water filtration system when the sky split open with coruscating energy arcs. His last conscious thought was of the mystery benefactor. Would she find safety before the storm consumed everything? Kira registered the massive energy disruption moments before her sensors detected Ethan's vital signs failing in the wasteland. Her observation post shields protected her from the storm's worst effects, but Ethan had no such protection. The conflict between duty and desire reached a crescendo as she watched his heat signature growing fainter on her display. Protocol demanded she remain sheltered. Logic supported that choice, but her hearts, both of them, screamed otherwise. She burst from the crystalline safety, her suit systems immediately screaming warnings as the storm's energy interfered with her camouflage field. Blue lightning danced across purple clouds, casting the ruins in stark relief. She found him collapsed near a twisted radio tower, his body convulsing as hypothermia set in. Ethan, the name felt strange on her tongue, but right, so right. As she knelt beside him, the storm surge caused her camouflage to fail completely. For the first time, she stood exposed, her pale blue skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns, her elongated limbs graceful even in the chaos, her delicate features marked by concern. His eyes fluttered open. Instead of the fear she'd expected, a faint smile touched his cracked lips. "The friend, in the shadows," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "You're beautiful." The compliment, so unexpected, sent warmth coursing through her body. But there was no time for reaction. His temperature was dropping dangerously. Using strength enhanced by adrenaline, she lifted his larger frame and stumbled toward his shelter. The journey seemed endless. Rain that burned with radiation pelted them. Twice, they had to take cover behind debris as electromagnetic discharges threatened to cook them where they stood. But finally, they reached the modest structure he called home. Inside, emergency kicked in. Ethan's lips were blue, his breathing shallow. Using her suit's medical functions, she began stripping away his wet clothes, replacing them with thermal blankets from his survival kit. But it wasn't enough. Human physiology was different from Voltari, but the basic principle remained: he needed warmth. With trembling hands, she deactivated her suit's environmental controls. The bioadaptive material retracted into a thin underlayer, leaving her exposed to the human environment. Her skin tingled at the new sensation of air and fabric. She crawled under the blankets beside him, pressing her naturally warmer body against his. The contact was electric, literally and figuratively. Her bioluminescent patterns flared in response to the touch, painting the shelter in soft blue light. Sorry, he chattered through frozen lips. Cold. "SHHH," she whispered, wrapping her arms around him. "Body heat, you need body heat." As warmth transferred between them, the barrier of otherness began to dissolve. His shivering gradually subsided. Her heart synchronized to match his single heartbeat, an impossible biological response that defied Voltari science. "Why did you save me?" he asked when he could speak clearly again. His brown eyes met her violet ones in the dim light. "Because," she struggled for words in his language, "because watching you, your kindness, it changed something inside." She placed one long-fingered hand over her dual hearts. "You've been alone too," he said, not a question but a statement of understanding. She nodded. "Voltari live in clusters, community, but watching you, I felt more connection than," she paused, searching for words, "than in season cycles of my own kind." Their faces were inches apart now. The storm raged outside, but inside their small shelter, a different kind of energy built. Ethan raised his hand, stopping just short of her cheek. "May I?" Such a human gesture, asking permission, respecting boundaries across species. She leaned into his touch, her skin warming under his palm. Your skin, it glows, he marveled. Emotion response, she explained, even as the patterns intensified under his gaze. Happiness, excitement, other feelings. Other feelings, his thumb traced her cheekbone gently. The kind that have no name, she admitted. Not in your language, not in mine. They stayed like that for a long moment, studying each other's features. Then, guided by something older than words or species, they moved together. The kiss was tentative at first, testing the waters of alien biology and emotion. Her lip structure was different, her mouth smaller, but when he adjusted to accommodate, the connection blazed. She made a sound, part hum, part harmonic vibration, that resonated through both their bodies. He pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly her smaller frame fit against his. This is forbidden, she whispered against his lips even as she pressed closer. Both are peoples, they won't understand. Some things, he murmured, trailing kisses along her jawline and making her bioluminescent patterns dance with intensity, are worth the consequences. They held each other as the storm continued its assault on the world outside. Tomorrow would bring complications, questions, and likely separation by force. But tonight, in the warmth of shared connection, two beings discovered that love might be the most universal language of all. When dawn finally broke, they faced it together, changed forever by a storm that had nearly killed them but had instead brought them to life. Part 4, Growing Together. The morning after the storm dawned with an awkward beauty. Kira woke first, her internal chronometer attuned to her home world's longer day cycles. Ethan lay beside her, his breathing deep and regular, one arm unconsciously protective around her waist. In the clear light of day, the implications of their connection became stark. Her suit's emergency transponder blinked steadily. Soon, her people would come searching, and the human community would notice Ethan's extended absence. Careful not to wake him, she began calculating how to extract herself when his eyes opened. "You're thinking too hard," he said with a sleep-rough voice that sent an unexpected thrill through her. "I can practically hear the gears turning." "Complex situation," she replied, her accent more pronounced in the morning. "Both are peoples. We'll find out eventually, but not today." He stretched, then propped himself up on his elbow, studying her face. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded, her bioluminescent freckles still faintly glowing from their proximity. "Teach me your language, some basics." The request surprised her. Most species that encountered Voltari expected them to adapt, not the other way around. Why? "Because if we're going to figure this out, we should be able to communicate properly. And because," he traced a pattern on the floor, "I want to know you, really know you." She began with simple words. Resh for water, Mora for food, Kelith for feelings. But as they practiced, their lesson devolved into laughter at his pronunciation attempts and demonstrations that required touching, pointing, and increasingly creative gestures. "What about this?" he asked, leaning close and pointing to his eyes. "Veth," she replied, then pointed to his brown irises. "Warm Veth, like—" She searched for comparison, "like the earth after rain." "And yours?" He was so close now she could feel his breath on her skin. "Mine are, how you say, ultraviolet spectrum, not just purple to you." "Show me." She closed her eyes, accessing her suit's technical displays. "Your basic sight is so limited, but—" An idea formed. "Would you like to see, like Voltari see?" His enthusiastic nod was answer enough. She activated her suit's neural interface, modified it for human compatibility, and guided his hand to the connection point at her temple. "This might feel strange," she warned. The sensation was unlike anything Ethan had experienced. Suddenly, the world exploded with colors he had no names for. Kira's skin didn't just glow, it sang with electromagnetic frequencies. The ruins outside pulsed with energy signatures he'd never noticed. "This is how you see everything," he breathed, his hands reaching for her, watching energy fields dance between them as they touched. "Yes, and your emotions create patterns I can read like text." "What do you see now?" She blushed, her whole body illuminating with soft azure light. "Wonder, affection, and—" She paused, patterns shifting deeper blue, desire. Their second kiss was different from the night before. Armed with new understanding of how the other experienced the world, they explored with scientific curiosity and growing passion. She taught him how to activate the bioresponsive zones on her skin that made her luminescence flare. He showed her sensitive points that made her make those harmonic sounds that resonated in his chest. Days blurred together. They established routines. Morning scavenging, where she used her energy manipulation to help extract useful materials. Afternoons teaching each other their respective technologies. Evenings devoted to learning each other's bodies. One sunset, as they sat atop the highest intact structure in the ruins, sharing salvaged fruit and watching their world paint itself in spectacular colors, Ethan gathered courage for something he'd been planning. "Kira," he began, taking her hand, "I need to tell you something." Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to concern. "Problem." "No, not a problem, more like a confession." He produced a small object from his pocket, a crystal pendant he'd crafted from her observation post fragments and human tech. "In human culture, when two people, when they feel what we feel, we have ways of showing commitment." The pendant caught the dying light, creating prismatic patterns that made her gasp. "Ethan, it's beautiful, but your people, my people. I don't care about people's right now, I care about us." He fastened it around her neck. "This means you're mine and I'm yours, no matter what governments or councils or protocols say." Instead of words, she answered by pulling him into a kiss that made her entire body flare like a solar event. They made love that night under a sky full of unfamiliar stars, her bioluminescence providing the only light they needed, their combined energies creating something entirely new, a hybrid of human passion and Voltari bonding that transcended both their species' traditional customs. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, listening to the rhythms that held them together, she whispered, "Ethan, there's something about our energy melding. It's creating changes in both of us." "What kind of changes?" "You're developing subtle energy sensitivity, and I'm dreaming in your patterns. This isn't documented in any Voltari history. We're writing something new." He kissed the top of her head, where her hair felt like silk starlight. "Then let's make it something worth writing about." Neither noticed the approaching signatures on their respective detection systems, nor the fact that their combined energy signature had become bright enough to draw attention from both their peoples. In their secluded paradise among the ruins, they were too busy discovering that love might not just cross species barriers. It might redefine what it meant to be human, or Voltari, or something altogether unprecedented. The morning Kira's world shattered began like any other. She woke in Ethan's arms, their combined body heat having become her favorite form of heating. But as she moved to kiss him awake, her suit's alarm system activated with a priority she'd never heard before. "Incoming vessels, Voltari Council enforcement." The automated voice was clinical, uncaring of the devastation it announced. "Protocol 777 activated. Prepare for immediate extraction." Simultaneously, Ethan's basic comm unit crackled to life. "All survivors to designated safe zones. Unknown alien technology detected. Human security force deploying." They stared at each other, the reality crashing down like the electromagnetic storm that had brought them together. "They found us," Kira whispered, her skin patterns cycling through distress colors. "It's okay, we knew this might happen." Ethan sat up, already reaching for his clothes. "We have a plan, remember." Their contingency, a hidden cache of supplies and stolen technology at the edge of the dead zone, seemed impossibly distant now. But as Kira watched Ethan's determined movements, her fear transformed into resolve. "No more hiding," she said firmly. "No more running." Through the shelter's small window, they could see both human and Voltari aircraft converging on their position. Kira activated her suit's full defensive capabilities, while Ethan grabbed a portable transmitter he'd been modifying with her technology. "Kira Velmathi," the voice from the Voltari ship boomed, using her full ceremonial name. "You have violated the Prime Isolation Protocol. Submit for reconditioning." "Ethan Reeves," the human broadcast overlapped. "Step away from the alien threat. You are under our protection." Instead of fleeing, they walked outside together, hands intertwined. The moment was surreal, surrounded by the detritus of a failed colony. Representatives of two species that had never formally met now faced each other because of two young hearts that had dared to love. Kira stepped forward, addressing the Voltari Council ship directly. "Honored ancients, I speak not in defiance but in discovery. For seasons beyond counting, we have feared these beings. I have lived among them, one of them, and found not monsters but mirrors. They love, they sacrifice, they hope. just as we do. Her bioluminescence flared with each word, visible even in daylight, making her appear to glow with inner conviction. Ethan activated his transmitter, broadcasting to both human and Voltari frequencies. 2 years ago, we lost everything when this colony fell. We learned to survive by taking what we could, trusting no one, holding tight to our fear. But I've learned more about hope, about kindness, about what it means to be human from watching this incredible being than I ever did from my own species. The standoff continued, weapons trained from both sides. But something unexpected happened. Other voices joined the broadcast. Human survivors who had been helped by Kira's anonymous gifts. Young Voltari scouts who had been monitoring the situation and reporting the unprecedented cooperation they'd witnessed. "Stand down, enforcement units," someone from the human side commanded. "Agreed," came the reply from the Voltari council ship. "Lower your weapons." An elderly Voltari, easily identifiable by the deep purple of his skin and the complex bioluminescent patterns of age, floated down from the council ship. Likewise, a human official descended from the security craft. "You have created something unprecedented," the Voltari elder said, his triple hearts audible in his chest. "Neither human nor Voltari, something new." The human official nodded. "Our energy readings show your combined signatures have created a stable hybrid field. The scientists can barely believe it." "What will you do with us?" Kira asked, unconsciously tightening her grip on Ethan's hand. The two officials exchanged glances, then something remarkable happened. The human extended his hand, and the Voltari, after a moment's hesitation, clasped it. "You've shown us what we were too afraid to attempt," the human said. "Maybe it's time for first official contact." "The council will want extensive study," the Voltari elder added. "But perhaps the isolation protocols need reevaluation." As negotiations began between the two species, Kira and Ethan found themselves at the center of something bigger than their individual love story. But when the formal proceedings concluded hours later, and both peoples had begun discussing joint colonies and cultural exchanges, they were finally given a moment alone. They returned to Ethan's shelter, their shelter now, and collapsed together on the familiar bedding. "This wasn't what I imagined when I started watching you," Kira murmured against his chest. "What did you imagine?" "A lifetime of looking from afar, never knowing, never touching." She traced patterns on his skin that echoed her own bioluminescent language. "But now we get to build something new, together." He tilted her chin up, studying her face. "Whatever our new normal becomes, diplomats breathing down our necks, scientists wanting to study us, families from both sides to meet, we face it together. Promise." Instead of words, he kissed her, a kiss that held all the promises neither of their languages could fully express. As evening fell, they made love again, but this time it was different. Not the desperate passion of secret lovers or the sweet discovery of new love, but the deep, steady flame of two people who had weathered a storm and chosen each other anyway. Later, as they lay tangled together watching their sun set through the window, Kira's pendant caught the light, scattering rainbows across the walls. "What do you think's next?" she asked. "First, we finish building that filtration system. Then maybe we can expand it, show both our peoples how to work together." He kissed her forehead. "And after that, everything. Everything. Marriage, bobbies, if our biology allows. Growing old. Teaching our children that love doesn't see species or politics or fear. Building a world where no one has to watch from the shadows anymore." Kira's entire body glowed with joy, illuminating their small space with warm light. "I like the sound of everything." As the colony's artificial night fell around them, two beings from different worlds planned their future together. Above them, human and Voltari ships flew in formation for the first time, their lights painting new constellations in an alien sky. The storm that had nearly killed them had given birth to something unprecedented, and in the ruins of the old world, they began building something better, together.